Back before I met Todd, I thought I was something special. I had my own place, a solid job in account management, and according to my friends, I was a total catch. Looking back now, I realize I was living in a carefully constructed bubble, one where I believed I deserved the perfect man while blissfully ignoring all the red flags I was waving myself. For years, I bounced between relationships with men I thought were amazing. There was Zach, the sales director who whisked me off to high-end restaurants, until, after exactly 6 weeks, his texts dwindled from heartfelt paragraphs to single-word replies. Then came Ryan, who spoke beautifully about our future together, painting a picture of love and commitment, only for me to later discover he was delivering the same well-rehearsed lines to at least 3 other women. Jason lasted the longest, almost 4 months, before he suddenly decided he wasn't ready for anything serious. Funny how that realization hit him right after he met my parents. Each time one of these relationships crumbled, my friends rallied around me with the same tired reassurances. He didn't deserve you anyway. Any man would be lucky to have you. And I believed them. I never once stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, there was something about me that wasn't working. Instead, I blamed it all on men being trash. They just want one thing, I'd declare over wine nights, surrounded by my closest friends. It was easier than admitting that the common denominator in all of these failed relationships was me. Then, at a co-worker's barbecue, I met Todd. He wasn't my usual type. No designer clothes, no flashy car. He drove a sensible sedan and worked in IT operations. Practical, stable, reliable. But he listened when I spoke. He remembered the little details. He called when he said he would. Revolutionary, right? From the start, I framed our relationship as me giving him a chance. I'm trying something different this time, I'd joke to my friends, laughing like dating Todd was some sort of charity work. But the truth was, with him, I felt something I hadn't in years, ease. I didn't feel like I was constantly auditioning for the role of someone's girlfriend. Yet instead of seeing that as something precious, I convinced myself I was settling, choosing the safe option because I was tired of the games. 6 months in, Todd told me he loved me. We were at this little Italian restaurant, and he said it so simply, so sincerely, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I told him I loved him too because, in that moment, it felt right. But later that night, I twirled my wine glass in my hand and called my best friend. Todd said he loves me, I told her, half laughing. Well, obviously, she said. That man hit the jackpot with you. He's lucky you're giving him a chance. I know, right? I agreed, still laughing. I guess I just have lower standards these days. That moment, something so small, so seemingly harmless, was the first nail in the coffin of our marriage. And I was the one hammering it in. When Todd proposed a year after we met, I said yes. Partly because I loved him in my own way. Partly because I was 29, and I could feel time slipping away. And partly because marriage was the next box to check off. At our engagement party, my mother took my hand and squeezed it. He seems like a good man, Christina, she said softly. Treat him well. I rolled my eyes. Don't worry, Mom. Todd knows how lucky he is. I didn't realize then what she saw, something familiar, something she recognized from her own failed marriage. The same quiet entitlement that had made our home tense growing up. The same attitude that drained the life from my father. On our wedding day, I stood before family and friends and made a joke about finally taking a chance on a nice guy for once. People laughed, but Todd's smile faltered, just for a second. At the reception, fueled by too many glasses of champagne, I told Todd's college friends that he had really upgraded by marrying me. My maid of honor's toast included a line about how Todd had won the lottery with me. Little comments. Harmless jokes. Each one chipping away at something I couldn't see. After the wedding, we moved into Todd's house. I immediately made changes, new furniture, fresh paint, replacing his old things with our things. But looking back, I wasn't making a home for us. I was erasing him from his own space. The power dynamic in our marriage had been skewed from the beginning, but I was too blind to notice. When Todd got a promotion 6 months in, I couldn't just be happy for him. Instead, I told people how I had helped him prepare for the interview. I hadn't. I even let it slip that my connections had put in a good word for him. They didn't. I thought I was lifting us up, but really, I was stepping on his back to make myself feel taller. At dinners with friends, I'd sigh dramatically about having to teach Todd the basics: how to load a dishwasher, how to dress like an adult. Never mind that he handled all our home repairs without complaint, or that he did the taxes while I barely glanced at them. My single friends ate it up, laughing along, while the married ones exchanged glances. They saw what I refused to. I was crushing the man who loved me. Slowly, Todd started retreating. He stopped laughing at my jokes. He spent more nights working late. I saw his distance as his problem, never realizing that I was the one pushing him away. On our second anniversary, over dinner at a beautiful restaurant, Todd looked at me, really looked at me, and asked, "Christina, are you happy with me?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Of course," I said. "Why wouldn't I be?" He hesitated, then murmured, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm what you really wanted." Instead of hearing the hurt in his voice, I reached for my wine and laughed. Well, we all have to compromise somewhere, right? But hey, it worked out. We've got our cute house, good jobs, not bad for settling down with the safe choice. I said that to my husband on our anniversary. He didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He just went quiet, paid the bill, and drove us home. I thought he was being sulky. I didn't realize that night was the beginning of the end. Now, at 34, I sit alone in a quiet apartment, watching my ex-husband move on while I get ignored on dating apps. The man I once dismissed as my safe choice found someone who sees his worth, while I'm left to wonder how I let something so real slip through my fingers. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself I was settling. The truth is, I was never too good for Todd. He was too good for me. Before I met Todd, I thought I was untouchable. I had my own place, a stable career in account management, and a self-assuredness that made my friends declare me a catch. Looking back now, I realize I was living in a carefully crafted illusion, one where I believed I deserved a flawless love story without ever questioning the role I played in my own heartbreak. I bounced between relationships with men I thought were perfect. There was Zach, the charming sales director who wined and dined me in upscale restaurants, until 6 weeks in, when his once lengthy texts shrank into one-word responses before vanishing altogether. Then came Ryan, the master of sweet words and grand promises about a shared future, only for me to discover he was whispering the same assurances to 3 other women. Jason lasted nearly 4 months, his affections growing deeper just long enough for me to introduce him to my parents, before he abruptly decided he wasn't ready for anything serious. Each time, my friends would rally around me with the same comforting words: "He didn't deserve you. Any man would be lucky to have you." And every time, I let those reassurances cradle me, never once pausing to wonder if I was the common denominator in my own string of failed relationships. Instead, I blamed men. "They just want one thing," I'd declare over wine nights, shaking my head at the state of modern romance. It was easier, so much easier, than considering that maybe, just maybe, there was something about me that needed to change. Then I met Todd. It was at a co-worker's barbecue, a casual summer gathering where the air smelled of grilled burgers and sunscreen. He wasn't my usual type, not even close. No designer labels, no flashy job title, just a steady career in IT operations and an unassuming demeanor. He listened when I spoke, actually remembered the things I said, and called when he promised he would. Revolutionary, right? At the beginning, I framed our relationship as if I were doing him a favor. "I'm trying something different," I told my friends with a laugh, as if dating Todd was some grand social experiment rather than the beginning of something real. With him, I felt a comfort I'd never experienced before. I wasn't constantly auditioning for the role of perfect girlfriend. But instead of recognizing that as something rare and precious, I spun it as me settling because I was tired of playing games. 6 months in, Todd told me he loved me. We were at a little Italian restaurant, nothing grand, just a warm, candlelit place where the pasta was handmade and the wine was poured generously. He said it so simply, so earnestly, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I said it back, because it felt right. But later that night, I called my best friend Angela. "Todd told me he loves me," I said. twirling the stem of my wine glass between my fingers. Well, obviously, she laughed. That man hit the jackpot with you. He's lucky you're even giving him a chance. I know, right? I agreed, giggling. I guess I just have lower standards these days. I laughed about it. About the man who loved me more sincerely than anyone ever had. Looking back now, that was the first nail in the coffin of our marriage, and I was the one hammering it in. When Todd proposed a year later, I said yes, not out of some deep, soul-shaking certainty, but because I was 29, the clock was ticking, and marriage was the next logical step. I loved him in my own way, a way that, at the time, I thought was enough. At our engagement party, my mother pulled me aside. She squeezed my hand, her eyes full of something I didn't recognize then. He seems like a good man, Christina, she said softly. Treat him well. I rolled my eyes. Don't worry, Mom. Todd knows how lucky he is. What I didn't realize was that she had seen something in me, something she had once been herself. The same entitlement she had carried into her marriage, the same quiet poison that had made our home tense when I was growing up. She had lived this story before, only from the other side. Our wedding was beautiful, held at a charming venue by the lake, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine. During my vows, I made a joke about taking a chance on the nice guy for once, earning a few chuckles from the crowd. But for just a split second, I saw Todd's smile falter. At the reception, with too many glasses of champagne in me, I boasted to his college friends about how much he had upgraded by marrying me. My maid of honor's toast included a line about how Todd had won the lottery with me. The whole day was littered with these little remarks, each one chipping away at something invisible, something I wouldn't realize was breaking until it was too late. After we got married, we moved into Todd's house, and I immediately set about making it ours. New furniture, different paint, swapping out the decor he had carefully chosen for pieces I deemed more mature. I saw it as improving our home. I never once considered that I was erasing him from his own space. There was always a strange power dynamic in our marriage, one I had created. When Todd got a promotion 6 months in, I couldn't just be happy for him. Instead, I told everyone how I had helped him prepare for the interview, I hadn't, and how my connections at work had put in a good word for him, they hadn't. I watched my mother do the same thing to my father growing up, turning every one of his achievements into something that traced back to her. I had sworn I'd never be like that. And yet, there I was, following the exact same script. At dinner with friends, I made casual jokes about having to train Todd, how he didn't know how to properly load a dishwasher or match his socks. I ignored the fact that he handled most of the home repairs without complaint, that he took care of the things I never bothered to notice. My single friends ate it up, laughing along. My married friends exchanged quiet glances. I ignored them. Then one night, during dinner with friends, Todd mentioned he was being considered for a promotion. Before he could even finish, I cut in. Oh, that's because his boss played golf with mine last weekend. I lied effortlessly. I put in a good word. Todd set his fork down. Actually, Christina, it's because I've been working late for the past 3 months. Instead of backing down, I laughed. Sure, honey, but we all know it's about who you know, not what you know. The table went silent. Then Lisa, his friend, spoke. Todd's been coding since he was 15. He's the most qualified person on his team. I felt my face flush. I know my husband's capabilities better than anyone. Then, looking at Todd, I added the words that would haunt me. He's lucky I had such low standards when we met, or he'd still be living in that awful apartment eating ramen. Todd's face drained of color. He stood up, placed his napkin on the table, and calmly said, "I need some air." That was the moment I lost him. I just didn't know it yet. A month later, after a separation I had convinced myself was temporary, Todd met me for coffee and told me he wanted a divorce. "I love you," I said desperately. He gave me a sad smile. "I know you think you do. But love isn't supposed to make someone feel small." And just like that, he was gone. Now, I'm 34, divorced, and watching my ex move on with a woman who sees his worth in ways I never did. I scroll through dating apps, ignored by men who wouldn't have given me a second glance a decade ago, still catching myself making the same snide remarks, still unable to